place to spend Christmas. You could just see the horizon all around the ship. I don't think we saw a soul all day yesterday. So, I mean, we're in an incredible place. Plus, there was no washing up, which to me was the best thing. No shopping. You don't have to worry about anything. So it's absolutely wonderful to spend Christmas all together on the Sapphire Princess. So, yeah, I hope you had a lovely Christmas day yesterday. Boxing Day today, so we can still relax and enjoy. And then tomorrow we'll be in Punta Arenas. So we'll be visiting our first stop in Patagonia, and then the second day will be in Ushuaia. And then we head off across the Drake Passage down to the Antarctic Peninsula. So we're just kind of starting. Even though it's Christmas, we're just kind of beginning our Antarctic cruise. And today, I thought we'd have a little look at the Antarctic Peninsula. I met some of you yesterday, which was wonderful, and we talked about the Antarctic continent as a whole, about Antarctica. And today is a little bit more about the part of Antarctica that we're visiting. So we're going to the Antarctic Peninsula. So I thought we'd focus in on that. And if I haven't met you, my name is Caroline, and I'm from England. I'm one of the Antarctic experts and the Antarctic specialists. We come on board the ship, we're invited by Princess just for the Antarctic cruises. And we're here to talk on stage, to come and give some presentations. But the main part is kind of being out and about around the ship all the time in Antarctica. So any questions that you have, that's what we're here for. We love answering questions. We love looking at your photographs. So we're here all the time just to try to add something to your experience of the Antarctic. And kind of the more you know about the place, the more you'll enjoy it. So that's what we're here for. A little group of Antarctic people that are on just for this specific Antarctic cruise. And you may have seen around the ship, you may have seen the electric notice boards about IATO. And if you look on your television in your stateroom, there's a section called Introduction to Antarctica. And there's 2 short videos there that you can watch, and they kind of introduce you to Antarctica. So IATO are the International Association of Antarctica Tour Operators, and Princess are part of IATO. So we are part of this organisation. And it's a self-regulating organisation, so it's the private tour operators who have come together to regulate tourism in Antarctica, and they're trying to protect the continent as much as possible and to make sure that everything is done in the right way. And I just put a couple of websites up. These are out and about around the ship, so you'll see these. This is about being an Antarctic ambassador. So you're one of a very few number of people, a very small percentage of the population of the world that will have been to Antarctica. And that makes you part of a community that could tell other people about Antarctica, possibly talk to people when you get home, maybe do some talks at a school or a social club, because people are fascinated. You know, not many people come here, so if you've got some photos and you want to show, it's an opportunity to extend your holiday, really. It's an opportunity to become part of the Antarctic community. So if you're interested, have a look at that website about becoming an Antarctic ambassador when you get home at the end of this cruise, and you'll see that around the ship. Also, IATO are encouraging us to take part in citizen science. So when we're in the Antarctic, you can do things that are part of the scientific research. So if you remember, Antarctica is a continent for science and a continent for peace, and you can be part of this by doing some citizen science. One of them is a website called Happy Whale, and we use this up in Alaska quite a lot as well. If you are lucky enough, if you've got a good camera with a telephoto lens, and if you're close enough to the humpback whales when we see them feeding in Antarctica, try to get a photo of the fluke, of the tail of the whale, and you will be able to identify that exact whale. You'll be able to see where they migrate around the world, and you'll be able to follow that whale. So you can then tell the people at Happy Whale where you saw the whale, and that adds to our knowledge about these humpback whales and where they're going and what they're doing. So if you're interested, take a pic. There's the Happy Whale website. If you're more interested in meteorology, the weather, the clouds, there's another website called Globe Clouds. And this is a chance for volunteers to take observations of the clouds that we see in Antarctica, of the weather, and then you can feed that information into this website as well. So we can be part of this scientific community when we go down to Antarctica. And that is all part of being part of IATO. Right, before we start looking at the Antarctic, these are kind of a bit frightening when they come up like that. At the moment, if you've had a walk around the deck, you may have seen one of these albatross. It's the black-browed albatross with a black, the top of the wings connecting right across the back of the bird. And these are beautiful birds. So we're already starting our voyage down to the Antarctic. We're picking up these albatross. Most of these breed in the Falkland Islands, so we're kind of coming down south. So if you haven't been out for a walk around the promenade deck, have a little wander out on the higher decks, and just keep an eye out for these black-browed albatross. When we leave Ushuaia and we go across the Drake Passage, go across the Southern Ocean, that's when we'll be looking out for the wandering albatross. They're not quite as big as that. That was a bit frightening. But the wingspan's about 12 feet. So sort of 12-foot wingspan. The largest flying birds. They live to about 50 or 60 years old. They don't have to land. These birds live around the Southern Ocean. They can be out in the ocean for 5 or 6 years, just flying, gliding round and round the ocean. So they never come on land. They only come on land to breed. So these are extraordinary to see these birds as we come down to the Antarctic. So if you haven't had a look, have a look now this afternoon. It's beautiful weather. So go and have a look for these albatross and we can start to see those. Now then, before we get to the Antarctic Peninsula, we've got 2 wonderful stops on the way. So the first place we're going is Punta Arenas. So we're in Patagonia, which is the geographical region of Chile and Argentina, down the bottom, the southern part of the Andes. It's a kind of interesting, diverse area. There's temperate rainforests, mountains, lakes, grasslands. It's kind of a very incredible place to visit. Not many people get to come down here. And Punta Arenas is the kind of main town along the Straits of Magellan. So we're going to come along here, which isn't working. So we come along to the Straits of Magellan. There we go. Along here to Punta Arenas, and then the captain, I'm assuming, will come out, and then we head down to Ushuaia down the bottom here. So the first stop is Punta Arenas, and this was an important place in the days of sail, when the sailing ships were coming around Cape Horn at the bottom from the Atlantic over to the Pacific. When they built the Panama Canal, some of these towns down here kind of declined. Places like Stanley in the Falkland Islands, the Punta Arenas, and the ships were going through the Panama Canal. But before that, in the days of sail, this was a big booming town. You can see the wealth that was once in Punta Arenas, beautiful colonial style buildings there. And it's a wonderful place to visit. It's not really, if you've been on the Alaska cruises, you know some of the ports on the Alaska cruises on the Inside Passage that are very much set up for tourists. This isn't like that at all. This is very much seeing the real thing. So yeah, just you'll have an interesting time in Punta Arenas, that part of Patagonia. And then we head on down to Ushuaia, and we arrive, I'm not quite sure what time we arrive in Ushuaia, but the scenery, is it 12 o'clock? That would be perfect, because all the way around here is called the Chilean fjords. And again, the great thing about cruising is it gives you a little taste of different places that you might want to find out more about. So the Chilean fjords are similar to the fjords in Norway or in Alaska. They are glaciated landscapes, flooded valleys where the glaciers have retreated. There are big ice fields, glaciers coming down. So it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world, even if we just get a very small glimpse of this area. So we're coming down into Tierra del Fuego at the bottom of Patagonia. So we're coming all the way down. Again, half will be in Chile, and then there's an Argentinian half. So they're both Chilean and Argentinian at the bottom in Tierra del Fuego. And we start to pick up some of the Antarctic wildlife. So the Magellanic penguins, finally we get to see the penguins in Punta Arenas and Ushuaia, so you may be booked on excursions to go and see the penguins. They're quite easy sometimes from a distance. There's plenty of these cormorants or shags around, so they can look quite similar, but we'll be seeing the penguins. Condors, if you're looking up to the tops of the mountains, keep your eyes open for these incredible birds that are kind of flying from peak to peak across the mountain tops in the Andes. And the sea lions, you may be on trips to go off and see the sea lions as well. So there's wonderful wildlife. So this is kind of, for me, these are the things that I'm interested in. So you may well be interested in completely different things when we go to Punta Arenas or Ushuaia, but I guess this is sort of just trying to guide you through the things that I enjoy seeing when I'm down there. And for me, again, anything with ice, any glaciers, that's what I enjoy when we go down there. And you can see the ice fields, the glaciers, at the top of the mountains, and down the bottom here we've got the temperate rainforest up to the tree line, and then the glaciers or the winter snowfields above. So it's quite spectacular scenery. So I'm hoping I'll get a chance to sail through these fjords and you'll see some of this landscape in between Punta Arenas and Ushuaia, and then when we leave Ushuaia as well, there'll be some of this landscape around. So the forest has got these evergreen forests. There are lots of flowering plants. Don't forget we're here in midsummer, and so there are 500 species of flowering plants in the National Park. So if you're going to Tierra del Fuego National Park, which is just outside Ushuaia, there will be carpets of flowers around, and that's kind of nice to see before we get to the Antarctic, to see some green. And these are temperate rainforests, so similar to what you have in Alaska when you have the temperate rainforests, same kind of thing down here on the Chilean fjords. And another thing that is kind of fascinating in this part of the world is that the people who lived here after the last ice age, so when the ice retreated, the indigenous people who lived in this area, this is when Ferdinand Magellan came here in 1520, so about 500 years ago, when he sailed along the Straits of Magellan and Punta Arenas, and he saw the fires in the landscape, and that was from the people that lived here. And these are often called the canoe people. They didn't live on land, they lived on the water, so the name comes from their perspective. So the name Ushuaia is an indigenous name, and that means the bay facing out to the south. So they were living on the canoes, and they kept their fires going even on the canoes. So when Ferdinand Magellan came down here, he saw the smoke in the fire of the people that lived here. He called it land of fire and land of smoke. So this is Tierra del Fuego. This was their land. This is the people that lived here. And then of course, there's what happened all around the world when the sealers and the whalers and the people that came here from Europe and from the rest of the world, the diseases spread. There were tiny populations, and now there are no longer any of these people in the landscape at all. The culture is very much kept alive, which you will see in Punta Arenas and Ushuaia. The language is still here. So it's a fascinating thing. When you're in Punta Arenas and Ushuaia, you may be interested in the museums and just finding out more about these people that are no longer here. But that's who the landscape is named after, Tierra del Fuego. So here we are. We are sailing happily along the coast of Patagonia. We'll be arriving in Punta Arenas early tomorrow morning, and then right down to Ushuaia, the southernmost city in the world, in the continent. So right the very, very tip of Tierra del Fuego. And then we are heading off across the Drake Passage, across the Southern Ocean, down to the Antarctic Peninsula. So quite an incredible place to be. Usually the maps just show this middle section, so it's kind of quite unusual to be thinking about the Antarctic and the Arctic and these places that people don't usually sort of think about all that much. So this is where we're heading then, the Antarctic Peninsula, and as I mentioned yesterday, it's the kind of one of the most lovely places of the Antarctic to visit, because there is bare rock, so there's rocky landscape, there's the tops of the mountains, and also for me what makes it really special is you having the wildlife there. So there's all the penguins, whales, it's a wonderful, wonderful, rich part of the Antarctic to visit, and it is where most people visit as well. So it is just a few little things about it then. It's 1,120 miles long, and it's a mountain chain that runs north from the continent towards South America. So it's the northernmost part of mainland Antarctica, and it is about 620 miles from Cape Horn. So it's similar in length to the Rockies or the Andes. So it's kind of this mountain chain that comes down from the Andes down to Antarctica. And the Antarctic Peninsula is not owned by any one country. It's governed by the Antarctic Treaty, which I think we talked about a little bit yesterday. And it will have, so we call it the Antarctic Peninsula. In Chile, it's called the Peninsula Tierra de O'Higgins, and in Argentina, Tierra de San Martin in Argentina. So the different countries are still allowed to stake a claim to areas of Antarctica, and this part of the peninsula is claimed by Great Britain, Chile and Argentina. There's kind of overlapping claims on this part of Antarctica, and we're going to talk about the politics and the Antarctic Treaty later on, but that's the area that we're visiting, is the Antarctic Peninsula. And as I said before, why do most visitors choose to come here to this part of the Antarctic continent? It's the part that's closest to South America. So it is just a short hop across the Drake Passage. I shouldn't have put that in, I am so sorry. It's fine, there is nothing to worry about at all. Honestly, sometimes it can be completely flat. They call it the Drake Lake sometimes, and you don't feel anything. Other times you get these storms coming through the Drake Passage, and nowadays with big ships like this, and we've got all the satellite navigation, the wonderful captain can work out a route across kind of in between the storms that are coming. You get a lot of storms because there's the icy cold air over Antarctica and then the warmer air coming down, so you create these weather fronts. Plus the fact you've got the Andes coming down South America, you've got the Antarctic Peninsula, so all the wind gets funneled through a little gap, and that's the Drake Passage. So we have to cross that to get to Antarctica. There's no way about it. But the big ships like this one are so much better than being in the little tiny ships. We can get across quickly, we're very stable, and you can just have a nice easy day and just take it easy. If it does get rough, the captain will tell everybody what to expect, and just to make sure you hold on when you're moving around the ship. That's the main thing. But yeah, nothing to worry about. Ignore that. Pretend I never put that up. We won't mention that again. Okay, that's it. We just mentioned Boxing Day. Okay. So here we are. We are sailing towards Punta Arenas. Ushuaia at the bottom of Tierra del Fuego at the end of the world, and then we are heading out across the Drake Passage. And usually whenever ships come across to the Antarctic, we stop at these islands here because they are beautiful and they are stunning and they're an incredible place to see. So these are called the South Shetland Islands, and they are 65 degrees south, so they are roughly at the same latitude as the Northern Shetland Islands in north of Scotland. So that's why they're called the South Shetlands. And they were first seen in 1820, so it's all very recent in terms of history. So that was when they were very, very first seen, when the first ship was blown down across the Drake Passage. And this is kind of what the landscape looks like. This is Elephant Island on the South Shetland Islands. We're sort of looking at the tops of mountains. That's what we're really seeing. We're kind of sailing around the tops of the mountains. They are snow-capped peaks rising straight out of the sea, icebergs, glaciers, kind of landscape that we just don't see anywhere else. And this is Elephant Island. I don't know which order we're going to be doing the visit in, but the captain will tell us that. So this is Elephant Island. Some people said it's called Elephant Island because it looks like an elephant. Don't really think that's particularly true, but there were definitely elephant seals there, so it's probably named after the populations of elephant seals. And we'll talk about these later. You can see the males have these large, big proboscis noses that they use for mating, for making sort of loud noises when they've got their harem of female elephant seals. So they're beautiful, aren't they, in some ways? They're fascinating creatures. We'll talk about those a bit more later on. So that's Elephant Island, and if you know your Antarctic history, you will be familiar with some of these names, with Point Wild, Cape Valentine, and this is the part of Elephant Island that we like to go to, and it's a bit of a pilgrimage if you are interested in Antarctic history, if you know of Ernest Shackleton, the great Antarctic explorer. And we go there because this was where Ernest Shackleton led his men. After their ship sank in the Weddell Sea, he managed to get all his men back here to Elephant Island, and they used their tiny lifeboats, which they dragged up the beach on Elephant Island, turned them over to make little shelters, and then Shackleton and Worsley and Crean and two others, they sailed across to South Georgia in one of these tiny little lifeboats and then came back and rescued the men. So that's the reason we visit Elephant Island, which is up top here. And then the other interesting island in the South Shetland is King George Island. And the reason King George Island's kind of interesting is it's the most accessible island in the Antarctic to have a scientific base. And we find that there are all sorts of, all different nationalities have their Antarctic science bases there. And the reason is because it's cheaper to build a research base on King George Island than it would be on some other parts of the Antarctic continent. So there are bases from Argentina, China, Chile, Russia, Poland, Uruguay, South Korea, Brazil, and then there's summer-only bases from Holland, Ecuador, Germany, Peru, and America. So we'll visit one of these, this area where all those science bases are. And there's the Russian science base, which has a Russian Orthodox church, the only kind of permanent building in Antarctica. And just around the corner is the Chinese base, the Great Wall base, the Chinese scientific station. And then very, very close, just 200 meters away, is the Chilean base. So we can see, so 200 meters away from the Russian base is the Chilean base. So it's very, sort of land is at a premium in Antarctica. And so all these scientific bases are built very, very close together. And that means that the scientific research is easy to share because it's very, all the bases are close together, the scientists will be socializing, using each other's facilities. So this is all part of what we talk about, the Antarctic Treaty, where all the nations that are signatories to the treaty, they work together, they share their science, and they kind of try and help each other out where possible. So we'll be seeing one of the islands where there are lots of scientific bases. And this is the bay, Admiralty Bay in King George Island. And there's kind of three main inlets with glaciers pouring down, and there are science stations inside Admiralty Bay as well. So this was in the whaling days in the early 1900s. This was an important whaling station, or a location for whaling at Admiralty Bay. So you often see the whale bones around the beaches inside. And when the whaling came down from the Arctic down to the Antarctic. But luckily now the whales are kind of coming back to the area, and there's a good chance that we can see some whales when we go into Admiralty Bay. So this is the Polish station, this is the Artowski station. There are seals, there's some seabird nesting areas, penguin colonies around there. And this is the Brazilian station, the Commandant Ferraz, the Brazilian station. So there's usually about 60 or so scientists living there in summer, and then in the winter there might be about 15 people living there in the winter. So hopefully we'll be able to see some of these bases when we're around there. And you'll also see that in these areas of the Antarctic there's vegetation. You'll see the green moss or lichen that grows in the Antarctic. There's not much growing in the Antarctic, it's pretty much just white, but the climate is warming, especially here, and the ocean's warming, then there is more and more vegetation on these South Shetland Islands. So they call it the greening of Antarctica, so you can see some of that while we're around on the South Shetland Islands. And there's also a fair bit of ice in the water, and the penguins use the icebergs as like little buses. They sort of travel around on the icebergs to get about. So we'll be looking out for little icebergs around Admiralty Bay and any penguins that are on top of the icebergs. And then one of the other places on the South Shetlands that we usually visit is Deception Island. So you can see there's Elephant Island up here, King George Island, Deception Island. So they're the main places that we visit on the South Shetlands. And Deception is very different to the other places that we visit because it is a volcano. It's the collapsed caldera of a huge volcano that erupted about 4,000 years ago. So it's an ancient volcano, and the inside has collapsed, and we can sail around the outside of the island. So it's kind of an incredible place if we get a chance to go there. So you can see what it looks like from the air. You can see that there's a natural harbour inside, and this would be the area that we come to here. And around here are huge penguin colonies. They're chin-strap penguins, so hundreds of thousands of pairs of penguins. And this is what we see. So we see little dots on the horizon. This is the penguins here. So you think, there's no penguins, you can't see any, and then you realise that there are thousands and thousands of them in colonies, and they come down in their little penguin roads down to the sea to go fishing. So these are all nesting here for the summer, they're raising their chicks, and then once the chicks have fledged and gone off, they go back out to the open ocean again. So it's the perfect time to visit when all the parents are out feeding to bring the food back to the chicks on the nest. So we usually see them in the water like this, porpoising through the water, but if we were to see them more up close, you can see the chin straps have got a little strap. They're like little policemen with a helmet on, the little strap underneath like that. It's like gorgeous, gorgeous little things. And then from the South Shetland Islands up here, that is when we come down to the actual continent. So that is when we reach the Antarctic continent, and we will be seeing the Antarctic Peninsula. So Antarctica is divided into two, and we're seeing the just that edge of this part of the continent. And the main area that we visit is around this place in the middle here called the Gerlache Strait. one of the human kind of habitations. There's nothing there. You know, this is a wild, proper Antarctica. But we visit it's an old science station, an old British base that is now owned by the UK Antarctic Heritage Trust, and it's a place called Port Lockroy, and it's kind of run now for tourists to visit. It's a post office, so people use post offices as ways to claim areas as their own, and we hopefully will be able to get fairly close to Port Lockroy, and I hope we may be able to get some people to come on board to talk to us about what they do at Port Lockroy as well. So that should be one of the places we visit, and it is also surrounded by a large gentoo penguin colony. You sometimes get leopard seals in the water around there hunting the penguins. Often get pods of orcas around this area as well, so it's a great place to stop and just see what happens when we're around that part of the Antarctic. It's at the entrance of a channel called the New Channel, which is a beautiful place if we can go down there as well. The thing in the Antarctic is everything depends on the ice, and it depends on the weather and the wind, so we can never make a definite plan. We really have to wait to see what the ice is like and what the weather's like, and then the captain will tell us exactly where we're going. So we might think, why do we come to this part of Antarctica? Why do we come exactly to here on the Antarctic Peninsula? And the reason is the scenery is just spectacular. So we've got these mountain peaks soaring straight out of the water. We've got the icebergs, the crystal clear water. The air is crystal clear, so you lose all sense of perspective. And when we're on the ship in Buenos Aires or somewhere, we feel like we're on a great big ship. But when we're down here in the Antarctic, we feel tiny. We feel dwarfed by this enormous continent around us. So that's the reason we come here. And there isn't one particular thing to see. It's just to enjoy the whole thing. So it's just a case of either going out on the promenade deck or the open decks, if you're lucky enough to have a balcony. Even if you're sitting in the Horizon buffet, just looking and watching the whole thing and just taking it in, and there's something kind of magical about it, and it's just a chance to, it's just a short visit in some ways, but it is such a spectacular scenery that sometimes it's enough because it is so vast and so huge to see it. So we're very, very, very lucky to be going there. It's quite a privileged place to go to. And we see lots of these ice cliffs. So our ship would be up to about here. You lose all sense of scale, these huge ice cliffs that fringe around the edge of the peninsula. The light changes all the time, so you can go from a snowstorm to sunshine. You know, it's constantly changing, and it's crystal clear. So December is, pretty much the best time of year to visit. We've got all the penguins, all the penguin chicks will be about, the wildlife will be really active. We've got these incredible long days and these sort of magical twilight light as well. So perfect time to visit. Plus we've got New Year, so that's going to make it even better to be down there for the New Year's celebrations. Or if we're unlucky, it might look like So I think this is what Fernando called the F word yesterday when he said don't mention the F word. So it could be foggy. We could have some fog, we could have some mist. So it's lovely to see the pictures of the blue sky, and just be prepared that the weather changes quickly, but if it's foggy, chances are the winds will blow in and that fog will lift, and then we'll get the blue sky again. So whatever we get, we're ready for it. When you go to the Antarctic, you have to have that kind of mentality that we're ready for it, we'll take it on, and whatever we get, then we'll make the most of it. But the weather does clear. You'll get like 4 seasons in one day. So just make sure that you're out there and enjoying every bit of the Antarctic with whatever we get. Now, just to finish off, the other thing that I love about visiting this part of the Antarctic is the wildlife. And the reason the wildlife goes there in the summer because it is very rich. There are rich feeding grounds. the whales, the big baleen whales, the penguins, most of the seals, they come down here to feed, and they come down here to raise their babies. And the reason they come is because this sea ice is there during the winter, and as the ice melts, there's been algae growing on the sea ice, so that goes into the water, and that starts off a food chain. So we have these small phytoplankton, the small most primitive life forms, and that feeds the zooplankton, which are the little krill, the little shrimps, and then we have these incredibly rich swarms of krill, swarms of small organisms living in this icy cold water, and that's what all the other wildlife feeds on. So it kind of becomes like a 24-hour buffet for the fish, the seabirds, the seals and the whales. So even right down to the bottom of the sea, there will be the ice fish, the squid. There's so much life there, so much life in the cold, icy water. Cold water holds more oxygen than warmer water, and with the algae and with the nutrients, it forms a very, very rich place for animals to feed. So we get the penguins, the seals, all sorts of wildlife there. And up in the South Shetlands, these are the penguins that we'll be looking for, the macaroni penguins, the gentoos, the chinstraps. So we're not going to call them penguins anymore, we have to start calling them macaronis or gentoos. I don't want to hear anybody say there's a penguin. You need to say, look, there's a gentoo. This is a young gentoo. As they get older, the bills go very bright, kind of reddy orange, which actually matches their feet, which is very suave. So we'll see the gentoos, the chinstraps, the macaronis with these little tufts on their heads. And if you see something in the water splashing about, if it's too small to be a seal, if it's not flying, then it's likely to be a penguin. So that's what we'll be seeing. And then in the South Shetlands, we have the fur seals. So this is what attracted the sealing industry down here when they were selling the skin of the fur seals to the Far East and making a huge amount of money from the fur seals. And they were virtually wiped out, both of these, from the South Shetlands. And of course the whales, my favourite. So different species of whales that we could see anything down here, but we know the humpbacks are here because we know where they feed. I've got my sons on board with me, and I know with a teenager, if I want to find him on the ship, he'll be near the pizza. So that's how you can locate a teenager on the ship. The same with the whales. If we know where their food is, in the bays where all the swarms of krill are, we know where the whales will be. So we go to where the food is, and we know that that's where the whales will be. So the humpbacks, you get the fin whales. I mean, hundreds of fin whales around Elephant Island and that part of the South Shetland. So we kind of know where they are, and we'll be going to where the whales are feeding. But you could see anything at any time. And of course the birds, if you are here, if you're interested in the birds, these are breeding on the South Shetlands and the Peninsula, the fulmars, the skuas, the shags, and my favourites, the giant petrels as well, so we'll be seeing those. The snow petrels breed on the continent, so these are quite special birds to look out for. Pure white, quite beautiful, delicate birds. The emperor penguins, the closest colony is around here at Snow Hill Island. We're coming down here to the Gerlache Strait and this part of the Antarctic Peninsula, so we could be lucky. We sometimes see an emperor penguin on some floating ice, so you could be lucky, but we're not close to an emperor penguin colony, so we can't actually go to visit the colony, but we sometimes see the emperors around. And then on the Antarctic Peninsula, we get the penguins that like the ice, so the ice-tolerant species, the adelies, the gentoos again, and the chinstraps. So you'll get to know these penguins as we're down there. And the seals as well. The leopard seals are the big apex predators. They'll be feeding on the penguins. So anywhere there's a penguin colony, there will be leopard seals hanging about as well. And the crab eaters and the Weddell seals can be difficult to tell them apart when they're on the ice. The Weddell seals are the most southerly breeding mammal on the planet, and we're going to be talking more about the seals that we'll see. The orcas, orcas you can see anywhere, you know, it's just pure luck. Around the Gerlache Straits, there are a specific ecotype of orcas around there, slightly smaller, feeding on the penguins around the Gerlache Strait. A little bit further out, closer to the pack ice, you get the slightly larger orcas that are feeding on the seals, but you never really know. They'll be moving around all over the place, and it's just pure luck if you're out on deck and the orca are there. But there's more and more around the Gerlache Strait every year, so we could be lucky. That would be fantastic to see the orca around there. And as I said, the humpback whales, we're going to talk about these a lot more. These are the mothers, the babies coming down from the warmer areas, coming down here to feed. So they're bringing their young down to the Antarctic to feed. And if you are able, if you've got a good enough camera, this is what you want to try to get a photo of. And if you can get a photo of the fluke of the humpback whale, then this is the website, the Happy Whale website. And I have it on it's an app that you have on the phone, and you can just download the photo and it tells you the name of that whale, where it's come from, and you can track that around the world. So it's kind of a lovely thing to get involved in if you're able to get a photo of the fluke of the whale that you see. This is what we want to see. We want to see the humpbacks breaching. They're the most active whale, the most acrobatic whale. They're the whales that do these incredible whale songs. So they're wonderful to see. You may see them at home. You may see them if you've been up to Alaska, and down here it's the same thing. The whales will be coming down from the warmer water, and they'll be coming down to feed, and they'll be forming kind of feeding groups in the bays. They sometimes do this bubble net feeding. So that's what we're hoping to see. We're hoping to see the humpbacks down in the bays around the Antarctic Peninsula. And just to finish off, I think we're just pretty much on time. It's a wonderful time to visit. The light's incredible at this time of year with these very, very long days, the long twilights. We don't cross into the Antarctic Circle, so we don't go inside the Antarctic Circle, but we are very, very close. So we're just about there. And you'll get these incredible kind of light effects, the twilight weather, and kind of quite interesting optical effects as well. So just, even if you don't think there's much wildlife or much going on, just notice the light as it changes on the horizons. And you know, you get these beautiful evenings south of 54 degrees. They call it simmerdim. It's the same up in the north of Scotland, the sort of twilight times. So yeah, try and make the most of the long days. Take your cocktail out first thing in the morning, like I do. No, I'm not judging. You know, just whatever you want to do. Just first thing in the morning, last thing in the evening. Just really, really make the most of the time that we have in the Antarctic. And it is the most wonderful, wonderful place. And as I think we said yesterday, we're really looking forward to what you think of the place, and ask as many questions. And that's what, you know, that's what we're there for. So thank you so much for coming this afternoon. Thank you.